I'm going to talk about soldering and soldering irons today. So I have 3 soldering irons. These are my 2 thermostatic and they are in need of new tips. Now these are the tips, and I accidentally bought bent ones instead of straight ones. Now I've been told that this is just a matter of preference, so I'm going to change the tip on one of them and I'll solder with both and I will compare. So first of all, you can watch me change the tip. This is very gnarled, and the trick with it will gnarl. I can see that it will gnarl. Gnarling means you put the screwdriver in and instead of turning the screw, it starts to sort of wear away the socket that you're putting the screw into. It's essential to get a screwdriver head that's exactly the right size to get the correct purchase. So this one seems to be best. It's the only one that will make it move at all. A lot of downward pressure as I turn. Well, it did make it move. Hopefully it still will move. No, that's still not moving. It's very rusted up. So actually I'm starting with the pliers and that's getting it going. So maybe that's the way I'm going to go. Let's see if this one will work now. No, that's too small. That's too big. That one seems to like it. Okay. So that's just a little grub screw there. It's got a flat end that just keeps that in place. There it is. Ooh, look at that. Now, to be honest, I kind of killed this one by leaving it on and then going away, which is where these come into their own. So it's safe, it's protected, so even if you do like I did and go away, you'll come back and you won't have burnt your house down. So let's see, I reckon like that. I probably ought to give it a clean up, but I'm not going to, in the interest of expediency. Now I think I'm going to want to do it like that. In terms of which way I want it pointing, it's got a 3-sided handle, which is actually quite comfortable to hold, and pointing it that way seems to feel quite good. Now, whether I'll be able to tighten it up, it's a shame when the screws go. Such a small thing. I could probably find another screw. In fact, the company I'm sure would send me another screw, but that's probably good enough. Now, when I solder, which I will do in about 15 minutes or so, I will, sorry, I don't know, I'm picking the screwdriver up, I meant to pick that up. This one, it's very old and nasty, but it does still work, so that's the one I usually use. So I will show you with a straight and with a curved, and I will let you know how I get on. This is the window that I've just leaded up and I'm about to solder. So I've rubbed all the joints with my tallow and I have my soldering irons. They're just out of view, but I have the one whose tip I've just replaced and the one whose tip I haven't just replaced. So this is the one I usually use. Only this side of it still works. You see that bright solder? On the other side it's dull. This will bring, this is tinning, tip tinner. this will bring a tip back a bit. You just dip it in and it coats it. And you've got a little bit now of bright on the other side, but yeah, it's still really only good on one side. Here's my solder. So it's always a little bit hot when you start, so I tend to start on the slightly thicker lead at the corner. So there, just a little dot. Solder is much stronger than lead. You don't paint, you use it flat and you leave it on the joint. The joint needs to heat up and then the solder will run onto it. So the angle is very flat. Now I'm just starting on these joints for no reason other than they're in the middle of the image you're looking at. If it's not taking, it'll be because there isn't enough flux, or flux is the sort of the name of what you put onto a surface in order to make sure it doesn't oxidize and the solder will run and adhere. And we use tallow, which I believe are candles made from beef fat. They use, there is a liquid solder, sorry, there is a liquid flux available, and I think copper foil people use that. They have a lot more fluxing to do. So there we have it. So this is how I'm used to working with my straight tipped soldering iron. So now I'm going to give it a go with the other soldering iron. Now I'm going to start, oh, I did it the wrong arm round. Okay, never mind, I'll spin it round later. I'm going to start soldering without tinning the tip to see if it works, and it does. So I'd say it doesn't feel that different, except for the fact that I want to spin it round, and the reason for that is this cable makes it want to sort of live that way round, the bend of the cable. So I'm slightly against its own sort of where it wants to sit. But yeah, I'd say it doesn't make a huge amount of difference actually, and you just get used to whatever. So again, you just want to keep it on the lead. Let's see that. If it doesn't adhere, give it a bit of a rub with the end of the soldering iron, because if you look at this piece of lead, it's a little bit duller than, for example, this piece. I hope you can see that. So rubbing it is actually just abrasing the surface a bit, which gives it a cleaner place to adhere to. Because if lead is dirty, it won't take. So you have to be a little bit wary, because although you're leaving the soldering iron on the joint, if you leave it on too long, you will melt the lead. I'll show you an example of that. So that's rather a nice piece. There we are. So there's a little bit of spare lead. I will just melt it for you. Oh, well, of course that's not working because it's ow, now it's hot. Okay, forget that. Just take my word for it. If you leave it on the lead too long, you will melt the lead. And that's why thermostatically controlled soldering iron is so much better than a soldering iron where you can't adjust the temperature. I think if you do copper foil work, you can probably have your soldering iron hotter. So there it is. Hopefully the technique I'm using for soldering is helping people who haven't soldered before. Again, look how flat I'm keeping. So the angle, so that would be completely horizontal. I'm really only just doing it like that. So you're letting the solder flow, you're not painting with the solder. You're warming up the lead and the solder is running off the soldering iron and onto the warm lead. And you can cover joints this way that have opened up. So I'm trying to find a joint that isn't tight. Can't see. This one, let's say this one. So there's about 1.5 mil at this end, and what I would generally do is split the difference. And that will be covered up by the lead, no problem. By the solder, rather, no problem. Sometimes you want to come at the joint this way around because you'll get the width of the soldering iron in the direction of the hole you want to cover. You see, that's the wrong way round for that joint, so I came at it this way round. This is a dirty piece, so let's see if that takes or if it needs a rub. Now, see that? It just didn't take. Give it a rub. There it is. And that's because of the dirty lead. You can use a little steel brush, wire brush, if your lead is really dirty. That would be the way to go. But none of these joints would actually solder at all if it wasn't for the tallow. This solder is 50-50 tin and lead mix, which is the sort of medium grade. You get a 40-60 and a 60-40, and where it makes a difference is the flow. And if you're doing copper foil, you need the lead to flow more easily. That's a more expensive mix. I think that's the 60-40. I never remember which way round it is. The 40-60 is, I think, the cheapest mix. And I just go for the middle one. I'm used to it. Maybe if I worked with the more expensive mix, I'd say, wow, this is so good. But this seems to work just fine. So I will work my way around all these joints, and I will usually forget at least 2 of them. But I pick them up later during the cementing process. And then I will flip the window over and solder the other side. And that is your moment of vulnerability. And actually on a window this size it's not a problem, but on big windows it's a horrible moment really, because it doesn't have the strength it needs, and you're sort of moving it in a precarious way. But I don't think I've ever had one go amiss, so that's all right. Anyway, I think you get the idea now. Any questions about soldering, just let me know and I will try and help them, answer them, help you. Sorry, I'm now concentrating. It's very hard to speak coherently and concentrate. Well, it is for me anyway. And if you don't leave your soldering iron on the joint for long enough, when you lift it up, you'll get sort of peaks, and they're rough when you touch them, or they're sort of spiky somehow. Not nice. You want them nice and flat, and you don't want to overdo the solder either. Neat soldering joints. You see that one peaked then, so leave it on a bit longer. See if I can get it to do that again. Yeah, see that peak? I don't know if you can. That you don't want. Leave it on a bit longer and it goes flat. And then you can use your soldering iron to just, while the solder's still hot, move it around in the direction you want. There we are. There's a gap there to fill. Actually, I'm going to scrape away there. It's much nicer soldering bright lead than old lead, because it just runs really well. See, this one is peaking. Don't like that. There. I've been told you can tell the quality of workmanship most from the quality of the soldering. So if you inspect an old window and you want to assess the craftsmanship of the maker, you look at the soldering joints and see if they're neat. It's a bit alarming, isn't it? The idea of somebody inspecting a window. Don't want to be found wanting. But it's not tricky, it's not too difficult, and there's such a lot of soldering involved that you'll get all the practice you need. And you'll probably use too much solder at first, but that doesn't really matter. Again, these joints are a bit dull. If it really doesn't take, you're going to have to scrape away at the surface with your wire wool or wire brush. And if you're wondering, basically, the longer you leave lead, the duller it will go. That's why some of this lead is bright and some of it is dull. It just depends on what batch it's come from in my workshop. I'll just show you on this joint what it's like if you try and solder without any tallow. It doesn't even flow off the soldering iron. So now I'll put the tallow on. I don't need to put any more solder on this because I already did load it with solder. There it is. So you can see what a difference it makes. I'm not going to solder this edge or this edge because this window came up a bit small, so I'm going to put slightly bigger edging lead on, which actually can look nice because it doesn't get lost behind the beading in the door. So that can be quite a nice feature. Sort of gives it a stronger border. So this is 12mm, which is the normal width that you would use on a window, and this is 16mm lead. And the reason this has come out small, I suspect, is the number of diagonal joints. So when you do a window with lots of curves, they tend to grow. And when you do a window with lots of diagonals or miters, they tend to shrink. And I think the reason miter joints shrink is, well, I used to do a lot of woodwork, and I found if you did a mitered joint, it really exaggerated any discrepancy, like massively. Butted joints are so much easier to do than mitered joints. So I think that's just what happens in every context, really. I mean, when I say it's come out smaller, my windows normally come out dead on, and this has probably come out maybe 2mm all round too small, 3mm all round too small. So it's not a massive discrepancy, but obviously it's a window, it's got to fit, so you have to remedy it. The other way to remedy it, if you don't have any bigger lead, is to put a steel inside the 12mm edge lead, and that will give you about a mil extra. So I wonder if I can find a steel to show you. This is a steel. It's about a mil thick, and it sits inside the lead like that, and they're used to give strength to a window that needs extra strengthening because of the design. And as you can see, this will just move the glass a mil further away from the heart of the lead. So if you put this all around your outside lead, you will gain a bit of width on your window if you need it.